Welcome back to the Kristian Garic Show. Chase Spears is my guest as he joins me each and every Tuesday in the 12 o'clock hour. His resume is expansive. He's a retired Army major, contributor to AmericanMind.org. He wrote as a guest columnist for RedState.com. He's also Dr. Chase Spears. Chase, how are you? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chris. I'm well. How are things down your end of the world?
Oh, look, I'm glad you asked that because locally here, there's a TV station called WLOX, and Dave Elliott, who's been an anchor on WLOX for 4 decades, said this. I'm going to play it for you, and then I'm going to tell you what happened to him.
This is so unlike me because I'm usually a vote guy. I'd like to see 100% voter turnout, whether it's for your local sheriff or president of the United States. But if your hatred for Donald Trump is so strong, it's kind of a sickness, by the way, but if it's so strong that you're planning to go in that voting booth and vote for Kamala Harris, do you listen to her? Do you know anything about her? Anyway, do yourself, do the country, do the world a favor, and just sit it out. Stay home. Don't vote. This has been a public service announcement.
Chase, he did that on his own personal X account, not the station's, and he was promptly fired. Another example of corporate media suppressing conservative voices. The floor is yours.
Isn't it sad, Kristian, that this is where we're at as a nation, that if you say something like that encourages people not to vote for a literal open Marxist, someone whose only campaign slogan is "my opponent is a Nazi," and your personal time on your personal account, that you will be fired. You and I both know that if he would have said the opposite, if he would have said, look, if your misogyny keeps you from venting for Kamala Harris, sit home and sit this out. If that was the message, not only would he not be fired, he would probably be patted on the back when he went into the news station. This actually kind of translates really nicely into what's going on with the Washington Post right now. The Washington Post, as well as the Los Angeles Times, announced a few days ago that they are not going to do presidential endorsements this time around, and that they're planning to get out of the presidential endorsement business, period. And Jeff Bezos cited the fact that, look, you can't get around the reality that the news media today is held in extraordinarily low regard. That's a fact. That's been a fact for a while. And to his credit, Bezos, even though I disagree with him on so many things, he does have a sense of business, and he has a sense that, you need people to want to do business with you if you're going to stay in business. And the Washington Post has been losing money tremendously hand over foot, and he decided, you know what, let's try to switch this from being a bastion of just one worldview that alienates the rest of the country that's outside of the Beltway bubble. Let's try to be a little bit more open-minded. And, of course, his newsroom is in open rebellion against him. The red meat Democratic voters are in open revolt about it. Your colleagues down there at the TV station, they apparently don't know what time of day it is. They don't care that the news media is not trusted, and they're making just one more short-sighted mistake. And I want to applaud your colleague down there for speaking the truth in an age that is not popular to speak the truth. That was a brave thing to do, and I commend him for it.
Chase, tell me if you disagree with this. I'm seeing a lot of things like you mentioned, the WAPO and LA Times not endorsing Kamala. And I think companies are starting to change their messaging as well. You're even seeing some Democrats trying to hitch their wagon to Donald Trump in some advertising campaigns in terms of, look, I've worked with him on this, that, and the other. I think that they're hedging their bets. And I think that's a good tell as to how this thing could turn out when the narrative starts to shape in a different way, and they're no longer pushing some of the things that they once did. I think tells me that they are almost resigned that Donald Trump is going to be the 47th president of the United States.
I think there's something to that, Kristian. I do think they see the numbers and they realize that there is very likely to be a change in administrations. I think back often to the saying that was written by William Shakespeare, there's a tide in the affairs of men. The opinions of humanity and the cultural movements of humanity do not always stay the same. Progressives like to think they stay the same. They always like to say once they've got an anchor point in, we're moving forward and we'll never move back. And of course, history shows that that's not the reality. Civilizations do move forward and they do move back. I remember even just 4 years ago on X, back when it was Twitter, all the transgender activists were just lining up there and doing all these blast tweets, trans men are women, trans women are men. And if you challenged that, you got blown up. That hasn't been the case in the last couple of years. We've seen the tide turning. And so I do think that businesses are starting to realize, as Michael Jordan once said, you know what? Republicans buy tennis shoes too.
Yeah, and I think you can even also look at the stock market over the last couple of weeks. Had some pretty good days, and that's because I think people are optimistic about what's going to take place and how the economy is going to recover under President Trump. The reason why I can relate to the WLOX anchor Dave Elliott, Chase, I've been there. I've been under the corporate overlords that tell you what you can, and this kind of relates to your time, what you were just talking about under the Biden administration, your time in the Army. And I've been there. I know what that's like to basically be chastised. I mean, there were several times where I was asked to take down a post on my personal social media account. So I can very much relate to just how oppressive it is and how they try to silence conservative voices in the media.
I remember not too long ago, I shared a story about how when I was actually in the process of retiring, and I no longer worked for the Army, I was on a fellowship working for a lawmaker, and the sergeant major of the Army's office didn't like a tweet that I had put up and called and tried to basically intimidate me about it. And, of course, I refused to remove it and told them exactly why I put it up and why I stand by it. But, I mean, that's just one small inkling. I could fill an entire hour just going over the basic wave tops over what it was like trying to be a conservative spokesman in the force. And so under the Biden-Harris administration, circles of fear, these spirals of fear in the military for those who just hold a basic constitutional perspective became very, very real. So it's incredibly rich that they're now the ones out there name-calling.